The gimbals that you see here are some of the best gimbals for smartphones, and some of them, like these two, also double up as hybrid gimbals so that you can use them with phones and cameras. So with this wide range of gimbals, all of them with different shapes and different features, which one is the best? They all do very similar things, but in very different ways, and you should expect a dramatic difference based on the amount of money that you pay. Now, the question that you need to ask yourself is, do you need to go for this gimbal and everything that it offers, or do you need to go for this one that is 3 or 4 times as less? You want a gimbal that doesn't restrict your movement, and some of these gimbals give you exactly that. This is the DJI OM6, and this is the Hohem iSteady Mobile Plus. These two are the latest gimbals to come into the market. These three are gimbals that have been around for a while. You got the Feiyutech G6 Max, the Zhiyun Crane M3, and the Feiyutech Scorp Mini. This gimbal, the OM6, it's a gimbal that I reviewed recently, and in my opinion, I cannot really recommend this gimbal unless you do vertical work, no horizontal work. And I have reviewed all of these gimbals, so you can look up for those reviews. I really am not going to go through every single aspect because this is not a review of any of these gimbals. Okay, this is a comparison. It's my opinion and my opinion only. My opinion might be very different than yours. My filming circumstances may be different than yours. I might appreciate and value certain things that you do or you don't. So always take everything with a pinch of salt. This is the type of gimbal that you put on a table and you do your TikTok, your Instagram stories, or your YouTube shorts, and maybe some movement, but always with a gimbal vertical, because the limitations that this gimbal has, it's just too much for me. You might be okay with the ergonomics and the way this gimbal operates, and if you do, I take my hat off because you deserve admiration. Okay, this gimbal is designed backwards, but even then there will be people that will swear by it, and this gimbal for them will be the best thing ever. Now, this is a very interesting gimbal. Okay, this gimbal is 30 or 40% cheaper than this, and this gimbal behaves as a gimbal is supposed to behave, as pretty much any of these other 3 gimbals operate. The limitations of this gimbal is that it doesn't have the locks for the motors. For some, this might be enough to put them off. This is, again, entirely up to the person whether this is important or not. It's nice to have motors that lock, and if you want that, obviously you can go for any of these 3. This is the Feiyutech G6 Max, which is about 2 or 2.5 years old. But this gimbal to me is a workhorse. Okay, this gimbal just works. You know, if you want a gimbal that operates really nice, and again, it gives you almost as much as any of these 2 gimbals do, but obviously these are newer gimbals and much more expensive, so you know they do things in a sort of an easier or nicer way. This is a really nice gimbal, very easy to operate. You can put smartphones, you can put compact cameras. It takes about 1.2 kilos payload, which is way more than enough for any smartphone user. This is about 280 grams, so this is almost 4 times as much as that one. All your motors locked and all the functionality that you could possibly think of. The Zhiyun Crane M3, this is a really nice gimbal, I have to say. Zhiyun has done a very good job. Ergonomically, feels really nice. If you use a smartphone, it works really nice with the app. You get a lot of adjustments. The motors lock really nice. The screen here, it's really nice. And you get a lot of functionality. So much so that I would say that out of all of these is the one that gives you the best information to know if the gimbal is properly balanced, because there is a little section in the menu in the screen that actually tells you whether there is one that is applying too much pressure on a certain axis, and obviously you can easily correct it. So this is really great. Now, this is the Feiyutech Scorp Mini, and in my opinion, this is the gimbal that looks the most professional. So if you turn up to a job and you have any of these gimbals, people are gonna laugh at you if you rock up with an OM6. But if you are gonna be doing small independent music video on a small compact camera or a real estate video or a little corporate video, which one out of these 5 gimbals give you the better first impression? It's this one, okay? And rightly so, because this is a really nice gimbal, the Feiyutech Scorp Mini. Now, this is also the most expensive one, but for a reason. If you are someone that shoots sometimes with a smartphone and another times with a compact camera, this gimbal is a bliss to use, okay? Because it just works, you know, like you can link up the camera to the gimbal and adjust the shutter speed, the exposure, the ISO, even the frame rate, all done here on this little LCD here that you got there. The question is, which one out of these are better for you? Now, first things first is restriction of movement, okay? All of these 5 gimbals give you the same result, it's just in a very different way, okay? The OM6 is a gimbal that I do not recommend anybody because it has way too many restrictions. You can't really move up and down without having to twist your arm and do some crazy moves. You know, to me, that's just absolute nonsense, okay? If you try to do some creative shots, putting a monopod and trying to recreate crane shots, it becomes a bit of a joke because you need to have a massive pole sideways and then raise it like that, and it's just not nice. This gimbal, on the other hand, the Hohem iSteady Mobile 4, to me this is a surprise gimbal because you have no restrictions of movement whatsoever, just as with any of these 3, the G6 Max, the Scorp Mini and the Crane M3. It's pretty phenomenal that on a gimbal that is $99, you literally have no restrictions of movement. Now, the downside of this gimbal though is that if you do horizontal on the normal lens, no problem, but if you go on the ultra wide, you will see the back of the gimbal. Now, if you operate the gimbal filming something and you keep the gimbal in a slight angle, which is how you should always operate the gimbal so that all 3 axes are working, you're not gonna see the back motor, okay? So it depends again on how you use this gimbal. With the G6 Max, the Scorp Mini and the Crane M3, there is no restriction of movement and you're not going to see any parts no matter how you set up your camera, okay? So that obviously means that you're going to end up paying 2, 3 or 4 times as much as with this one. In terms of gimbal modes, all these 5 gimbals do the same gimbal modes, okay? They might call them differently, but essentially are tilt lock, follow, full lock, FPV, and then inception or rotating gimbal. Obviously, they do it in a different way because of ergonomics and the way they set up. If you are someone that is a hybrid shooter, so shoots sometimes with a smartphone and another times with a compact camera, this gimbal is a bliss to use, okay? Because it just works. You need to understand one thing, okay? When you do time lapses with a gimbal, no matter what smartphone you put on with lenses or filters, in the land of camera equipment, this is ultra lightweight. So if you take it outdoors, any wind, a little bit of wind, you're gonna notice the gimbal is gonna start rocking or moving. So you need to be aware of that. The OM6 has really nice integration with the DJI Mimo app. And if time lapses is your thing, it's actually not bad because it's going to be static on a tripod and you're not going to do very much other than setting keyframes, usually for the beginning or the end. The Hohem gimbal is surprisingly good as well. The only downside is that, again, if you do vertical, you're going to see the bracket. So I don't recommend that you do vertical. If you do horizontal, you're going to be limited to the main lens because the ultra wide, you're going to see the bracket. So this, again, is $99 and you're going to have to use the main lens. If that is okay with you, then, you know, this is a winner. Any of these 3 give you incredible functionality, and the Zhiyun has a much better, infinitely much better app than the Feiyutech. I don't recommend using these gimbals with the Feiyutech app. You can set up the parameters for the time lapses on the gimbal itself and then use your third-party app to actually record the time lapse or hyperlapse. The Zhiyun Crane M3 is the best integration between a gimbal and an app. The app is actually really nice, it's really easy to use, and it just freaking works, you know. So in that regard, the Zhiyun is really, really nice. But when it comes to the result, they all do the same thing. You just need to work around the limitations or not limitations on each gimbal, and trust me, you're gonna end up with really good results. Now, if manual adjustments is something that you value when you're using your gimbal and you want to have everything on the gimbal itself and you don't want to go onto whatever app any of these gimbals use, these are very different gimbals. Obviously, it's not the same what you're gonna get on the DJI OM6 that what you're gonna get on the Scorp Mini, okay? These are two different animals, and where you're gonna operate is, again, very different because of the ergonomics of the gimbal. You need to decide what works for you and the type of content creator, filmmaker that you are, and whether you think you may be able to get away with this flimsy gimbal, or you need something a bit more substantial like the Scorp Mini or the Crane M3. In terms of manual adjustments, once you set up the core adjustments on the app, you can pretty much adjust everything else on the fly on all of these five. Think of cars, okay? It's not the same to be driving a Bentley or a Ferrari or a high-end Mercedes than a cheap Ford or Hyundai. Cars, they all have four wheels and a steering wheel, and they all take you from point A to point B, okay? They all do that. But the experience and the way you get from point A to point B is very different. You need to then decide what is the experience that you want. Now, this gimbal has one thing above any of these other four gimbals, okay? And that is portability. This is the footprint of this gimbal once you pack it. And as you can imagine, it's a lot smaller than the Crane M3. Obviously, much smaller than the Scorp Mini and the G6 Max and so on. When you have something that is this small and this lightweight, you know, something's gotta give. You're not gonna have the same payload as the Scorp Mini. These two are relatively cheap gimbals, very lightweight, and the payload is around 300 grams. And these are purely for smartphone. And these are hybrid gimbals, which obviously are gonna give you a higher payload because they have to accommodate either a smartphone or a compact camera. Now, the Feiyutech G6 Max, which to me is a workhorse, and even if you buy it today, that is 2.5 years old, this is a great gimbal. This is about 1.2 kilos payload, this is about 2.5 kilos, and this is about 2.8 kilos. Any of these three gimbals give you a lot more flexibility than these two. Now, the question is, do you need this? Do you need a gimbal that can operate a camera? Because if you don't, maybe you are better off with a gimbal like this. This, no, okay, don't. This gimbal will give you as much as the OM6, but obviously less than this. And the same applies for the Zhiyun Smooth 5. Great smartphone gimbal that also gives you very similar functionality than these two, but it's a slightly better components, the motor's lock. So just because it's not here doesn't mean that it's not a great gimbal. In my opinion, this comes down to whether you're gonna use just a phone or a phone and a camera, or you want a gimbal that you can throw anything at it. And obviously it makes sense that you get one of these hybrid gimbals because they give you such a big payload that whatever it is that you mount on a smartphone, they're gonna be able to take it. Now, in terms of camera apps, these five gimbals are very different. The Feiyutech app has many limitations and it's gonna drive you insane and it's gonna put you off from using the gimbal. So in my opinion, just use the app for adjustments to the motors and a couple of other things. But for camera use a third-party app. There are plenty of apps and you'll be much happy with that. Okay, now the same applies with the Hohem. The Hohem app is actually nice, I have to say. You know, you use it and it has really nice functionality, but it's limited to 30 and 60 frames per second. So if that is the frame rate that you film at, then fantastic. But if you shoot at 24 or 25, then or 50, you're stuck and you need to use a third-party app. Now, the OM6 with the DJI Mimo app is probably, to me, the best app out of these five. It's an app that just works. DJI uses the Mimo app for pretty much every camera on mid to low end that they have. So they have plenty of time to develop it and, you know, refine it. And the Zhiyun app is actually really nice. It does everything that it's supposed to do. and it's really well developed. So in terms of app, the Crane M3 and the OM6 are the clear winners in this section. This is a $99 gimbal. These are anywhere between $200 to $350. Okay, so obviously the user experience is going to be slightly different. You get what you pay for, and it's not the same to use a gimbal that is $350 or $400 than it is $99. So bear that in mind when you consider to buy a gimbal. Now, who are these gimbals for? Okay, because these are very different gimbals for, I think, in my opinion, very different uses. Okay, so the OM6, if vertical is what you do, the OM6 is actually a decent gimbal. The Hohem iSteady Plus. This is a really nice gimbal for anyone that is starting with gimbals and it shoots horizontal. It doesn't have, obviously, the same functionality and features that any of these three gimbals are, because these obviously cost below $100. But in terms of gimbal moves and how a gimbal operates, it gives you anything and everything that you need. So for anyone that is starting with gimbals, that doesn't want to spend too much money, that doesn't have a great budget to work with, or is someone that is occasionally going to be using a gimbal and they don't want to go for a really expensive setup, this is perfect. And the same applies for the Smooth 5. It gives you a much better integration with the mobile app and the fact that you can lock the motor. So if that's something that you value, the Smooth 5 is really good, but obviously it's going to cost you a bit more than the Hohem gimbal. Moving on to the Crane M3. Okay, this is a great gimbal. Okay, this is a gimbal for someone that is gonna be taking filming with the smartphone really serious. Okay, because the integration with the app works flawlessly. The features are really nice, well designed, well thought out, and you can add accessories if you want to connect your camera and control the camera from the gimbal itself. The G6 Max, this is a workhorse. This for smartphones, this is amazing. You might just be starting to use both a compact camera and a smartphone, and you want something that is a bridge between the cheaper option and the more expensive. This is a great gimbal, and 2.5 years after I bought it, I would still rate it as one of my favorite gimbals to use. Now, the Scorp Mini, this is a very recent gimbal, very new. This is fantastic. This gimbal is an absolute joy to use. It just works, Balancing is really easy. Connected to a compact camera is very easy, and you don't need to do any installations or any adjustments. Things just work. Every single adjustment that you need to do on this gimbal, you can do it within the LCD and the gimbal itself. You really and truly, you don't need to go onto the app. And yet you can still do some really cool things if you want to use the app. You can get the gimbal to operate as you move the smartphone. I mean, you can do some really crazy things. This is like a bridge between a prosumer and a professional gimbal. This is probably for someone that genuinely takes smartphone filming seriously, that uses compact cameras, or someone that uses compact cameras and has the occasional use for a smartphone. This is gonna set you back anywhere between $300 to $400. So this is serious money, and it's not for someone that is starting. In my opinion, if you start, get the Hohem gimbal, you're gonna be very, very happy, and you can migrate your way up through the G6 Max, the Crane M3, and the Scorp Mini. And with any of these gimbals, you can get amazing results. And I have this video here where I show you some amazing moves that you can do with any of these gimbals and a monopod. So click on it and I'll see you there.